The character Taako from the actual play Dungeons & Dragons podcast The Adventure Zone was created more or less as a joke, but as the series continued, he progressed into one of the most loved and complex characters in the podcast. Taako is an elven wizard known for his snappy one-liners. With a love for cooking and a dark backstory, he makes the perfect unassuming D&D character. When the audience first meets Taako, he is funny and charming, but also vain and selfish. He has a strong sense of self-preservation and hesitates to throw himself into dangerous situations, even if it would help others. With character traits like these, what could go wrong? However, by the end of the podcast, he finds himself surrounded by family who he loves and would risk anything for. He grows to be someone who is kind to others and open with his affection for his loved ones. In this video, I'll be breaking down his character progression by analyzing some of the most influential scenes in the podcast. The Adventure Zone Balance has 69 episodes that are about an hour long, so I'll be choosing snippets from them that I feel mark turning points for Taako. The first scene I'll be looking at is from episode 16, the final episode of the arc called Murder on the Rockport Limited, which the party must search for a missing relic and solve a murder mystery on a train. In this episode, the party meets Angus MacDonald, who describes himself as the greatest detective in the world. He is a young boy who helps them solve the murder and becomes a recurring character in the podcast. He is also bullied relentlessly by Taako and the other party members. In this episode, Taako steals goods that were locked in the car with the relics, including silverware that is revealed to belong to Angus. The scene takes place just after the train crashes into a greenhouse and is completely smashed. The party was able to get the passengers off of the train before this happened, but Taako immediately calls attention to the valuables on board. In this scene, Angus explains how he was traveling with his grandfather's silverware that he was instructed to bring to his grandfather on his deathbed. Taako has stolen the silverware already from the train, and he decides to give Angus 3 forks rather than the entire set. How generous. I would like to break Taako's growth down into 3 trackable criteria for each scene I discuss, in the form of questions. 1. Was there an opportunity to be selfish? Did Taako take that opportunity? And lastly, did the action cause harm? In this scene, Taako had the opportunity to be selfish, and he took it. This did not cause Angus physical harm, but it did cause emotional harm that was intentional. Taako decided in that moment to take advantage of a trusting child to make a little bit of gold. You may be thinking, does Taako at least get a lot of gold from the silverware? Was it at least valuable, worth the pain that it caused? No, it was not. It was actually fairly inconsequential in terms of the loot that he gains from his adventures. This scene represents Taako's morals and general behavior at this point in the story pretty well. He steals for his own gain, and he's concerned with his reputation. The next scene I would like to discuss is from a bit further in the podcast. In episode 48, Taako is presented with a chalice that has the ability to change timelines. This should not be concerning because nothing bad has ever happened when a character decides to change the timeline. The chalice asks him to take it and to use it for whatever he desires after it shows him his worst memory. Taako has just relived the pain of living on his own and not having someone to watch his back, which is the reason cited for his hesitance to jump into danger and his catchphrase, "Taako's good out here." He has also revisited the worst memory that the chalice could show him, which was an accident during a cooking show that he hosted that killed 40 people. Taako thought this was his fault, but the chalice showed him that it wasn't and offered him the ability to change this. But he would need to give up his place in the current timeline in order to do so. When discussing the option to change the past, Taako had the option to be selfish, and I would argue that he did act selfishly, but that he could have been more selfish. He did not choose to change the past and save those people, because he knew it wasn't his fault that they died. Beyond his own guilt, he did not feel the need to resolve the situation. However, this was less selfish than the choice he could have made because it meant that he was able to help people in the current timeline and that he wouldn't cause a lot of problems by changing the timeline altogether. The complexity of messing with timelines makes the possible harm criteria difficult to measure, but it is interesting that he chose to stay in this timeline because then he was able to prevent further harm that could have happened by switching. The final scene that I would like to discuss is what I think best shows the character growth that Taako goes through in the podcast. It takes place in the second to last episode of the series. Taako has recently made aware that he has been wronged by another character, and he is angry with her for her actions. But he chooses to fight by her side anyway, in order to save a world that would crumble without him. He acts for the good of the world and for the group of friends that he loves. Taako chooses to fly directly into the heart of a world-ending storm, even though he really could have stayed on the planet below to fight if he wanted to. This moment contradicts the catchphrase, "Taako's good out here," and shows his ability to act selflessly. This moment had the opportunity for selfish action, but Taako did not take it. Instead of causing harm, Taako actively worked to prevent harm with his family and the whole world, even if it was at his own expense. The character growth that Taako shows in the podcast The Adventure Zone comes from the love and support that he was shown by his companions and from the desire to no longer be alone. Taako spent a long time believing that he had to be the best or the most charismatic or the funniest or nobody would want him around. He feared isolation, and although he projected confidence, he had problems with self-esteem. His found family helped him to understand that he was worth more than a role that he could provide for the party. He is worth more than just a simple joke. He became invested in the world around him, and he was willing to do everything that he could to defend it. This is quite a different character than he was at the beginning of the podcast, and it shows that with love and the power of friendship, anything is possible.